All right, hello everyone. My name is Tim Hill. Thank you so much for joining me for this session of Building Business. Today we're going to be focusing all 100% on LinkedIn, one of my favorite social media channels. So just to give you a little bit of a background on me, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of Social Status, and that is a social media analytics tool used by marketers. My background previous to this was in agencies and spent about 7 odd years in various digital and advertising agencies. I've also got my social handles there on Twitter and LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect with me, and obviously it makes sense to connect with me on LinkedIn. Before we actually go into the stats, and I guess like some of the strategies for what you can apply to your LinkedIn profile and your company page, I just wanted to visit where we're at in terms of monthly Aussie unique users across all social and just how LinkedIn fits with that. So you can see there it is right there, 6.5 million, which is a pretty amazing number when you think about it. So 6.5 million Australian users using LinkedIn every month. And these stats come from socialmedianews.com.au. You can see that they're not, in terms of LinkedIn usage, it's not too far behind some of the really big players like Instagram. The one missing from this is Messenger, Facebook Messenger, which is probably at around that 9 million mark too. So it really is the Facebook group of families that kind of dominate at the top. And then you've got YouTube there as well, basically neck and neck with Facebook. But yeah, LinkedIn's really, like when you consider that it's got more usage just than Snapchat, it's ahead of Twitter and Tumblr and indeed TikTok. It's really a formidable channel, and it's one where you can really basically reach any type of professional user. So it's got so much potential. And I just thought, this is probably more pub trivia than anything, but LinkedIn turned 18 in May this year, which again is kind of quite remarkable to think. It's not far away from being 20 years old. And LinkedIn also predates all of the other main social channels that we use today. It was certainly way ahead of Instagram, which didn't emerge until 2010. So LinkedIn's the OG when it comes to the big social networks. And yeah, who knows what the next 20 years will have in store for this channel. But today, what we want to cover off of these 3 things. So we want to talk about your own LinkedIn profile, your company page, and then we'll lastly have a look at Campaign Manager, which is basically LinkedIn's ads platform. So if you're familiar with Facebook Ads Manager, this is remarkably the same in how you use it. You know, a lot of the concepts are very similar. In fact, a lot of the social channels borrow heavily from Facebook in terms of all their business tools. So it is very useful. If you're familiar with Facebook ads, you'll just, be able to transition really easy into the LinkedIn Campaign Manager. So today, I'm going to cover off stuff and things. And what I mean by that is I'm going to talk about a lot of different concepts. So methodologies, approaches, processes, and I realized that there's a lot of different kind of varying levels of experience and kind of business stage in the audience. So I want to try to cover off lots of different things so that you can then pick and choose what are the most relevant strategies for you to apply today, and then know that there's a kind of a bit of a roadmap. So wherever you are in the journey, if you're starting off from square one, or if you're much further along, that there are steps that you can take today, and then there are things that you can do in the future too. Before I launch into those strategies and those methodologies, there's always, like, I consider these the 6 greatest hits of LinkedIn, because whenever you talk about LinkedIn, you always invariably hear opinions and some preconceived ideas of LinkedIn. So first, just to address them straight up, the first one, LinkedIn's becoming a lot like Facebook. I think that's true. A lot of people feel this way. And, when you fire up the LinkedIn news feed, it certainly does feel a lot more Facebooky. And that's no mistake. LinkedIn's really gone hard on developing their news feed. So it does very much kind of mimic Facebook. We'll talk about virality in a second and how you stoke that on LinkedIn, which is, I would say, a lot easier than Facebook. But I certainly agree with this sentiment that it is becoming a lot more like Facebook. Some advertisers really complain about cost per click being really high on LinkedIn, and you hear advertisers saying that a lot. I think throughout the pandemic, where ad budgets have really changed significantly, and you're seeing performance really go up and down. You're seeing this start of the effects of iOS 14.5 on Facebook. It's just thrown a wrench into the advertising industry. So I think these days, it's really one to try. And I think I ran some tests just about a few days actually before we did this session, and I ended up with actually an average cost per click that I thought was quite low. So I think it's the kind of thing that you should try and just see for yourself, are you seeing a high cost per click? And whether you gauge what's high or not is going to be based on how it compares against wherever you are spending an ad dollar somewhere else, be it Facebook ads, Google ads, wherever, promoting ads in other digital places. How does the LinkedIn cost per click, for example, if you're running traffic ads, how does that compare? The next one, right, this kind of general advice about writing single sentences, like no kind of wrapped lines, double-spaced status updates. This became very popular a few years ago. I think it was really Josh Fetcher, this growth hacker in the US, that kind of started this. And then everyone kind of piled on, and you see this happen all the time on LinkedIn. I would say, though, there's still elements of that work. So I'll talk about that in a second. If you haven't come across LinkedIn engagement pods or LEM pods, we'll talk about that too. I would generally stay away from them, but there's elements of, what engagement pods are trying to do that you can emulate yourself. But if that doesn't make sense at the moment, don't worry, we'll talk about it later. And this idea that LinkedIn's full of bots. So I generally agree with that. I think if you look at the in-mails that you receive, the unsolicited ones, they're just completely automated. Like, there's a lot of kind of inauthentic behavior. And I think if you look at LinkedIn groups, they're either like tumbleweeds and no one posts anything, or they're just spam, or they're completely off topic, or yeah, you name it. There's not a lot of like real community left, I think, in groups, although some would argue that there are. And then finally, Sales Navigator. So it's expensive if you're a startup, $110 odd a month. What I would say is that if you are selling, if you're doing relationship-based selling, and if you're targeting leads and kind of nurturing them over time and selling to people that way, Sales Navigator is absolutely worth every dollar. We used to do that, and I used to use Sales Navigator a lot, and it is fantastic for that. We've since pivoted to being much more about online acquisition. So Sales Navigator isn't as useful to us anymore, which is why I don't personally use it anymore, but it's absolutely an essential tool if that's the way you sell. So it really comes down to how you're selling and what your business, how your business acquires customers. Okay, so the first point is about the nature of virality on LinkedIn, or how a post reaches beyond the audience that you have. And I had this example here. However, if I just go, I'll show you a live example from the browser. If I go to the main news feed, the very first post when I loaded my feed was actually not from a connection. And this is exactly what I mean by your opportunity to kind of go viral, or your propensity for content to reach outside of your connection base. This is a really good example here, where this person is not a first degree connection, he's a second, but I'm seeing this because my first degree connection, Peter, commented on it. So it's this kind of behavior that first degree connections are taking against content, so either liking or commenting or sharing, which then extends the reach to, what's known as kind of like viral reach, which is this beyond your immediate community. And that is either connections or followers. And I'll get to that, the dynamic between those two in a second. But that's really the point that I'm trying to make here, and this is just another example of it. I'm seeing this post because a first degree connection interacted with it. But I also wanted to kind of highlight this see more link, because what really helps speed up virality is a lot of what Katie here has done, which is written short sentences, they're double spaced, and it really kind of encourages you and motivates you to tap see more to see what else she said. So yeah, I think that we'll get to this in a moment, but I just wanted to highlight just how much more potential there is for content to extend into viral reach than just the kind of limited reach that you would normally get organically if you were to compare this to, say, Facebook or Instagram, where you're much more limited to kind of your immediate community. And this capacity for content to kind of like expand out is really in play on LinkedIn. So if you're starting out your personal profile, I would say your main goal is to increase connections. And if you look over here on the right, this is my bio. And so you can see that I've got over 500 connections. So you know, I've got about 4,400, something around there. Now LinkedIn tops out at 30,000. So once you've connected with 30,000 people, that's it. You would then kind of like move into like kind of this next stage of where you start to gain followers. So if you think about like the kind of more celebrities on LinkedIn, like the Richard Bransons and whatnot, who have millions of followers, this is how they can have millions, is that they're not just first degree connections, they are indeed followers. And you can actually switch your profile to this mode at any stage you want, where the call to action isn't connect, but it's actually follow. But we will get to that in a second. I just wanted to also put in this list just a few ideas about how you can start to build connections easily. So if you're not at that kind of like 500 plus number, these are a few tactics. So the people you may know widget in LinkedIn is actually really sometimes scarily very accurate at showing you people that would be fantastic connections for you. You can also connect your LinkedIn profile to Gmail or Outlook or any other kind of web-based tool and kind of import your contacts that way and connect to them that way. If you go to events, or if you're doing virtual events and are attending virtual events, connecting with the people that you meet and other attendees is like a really good way to quickly get numbers up. And it's also a very nice way that you can connect without being kind of impersonal or spammy, because it'd be like, you know, great to see you at X event. And I know when I was building my profile, going to events, I could add 20, 30, 40 people really simply in a night. So yeah, you can get the numbers up pretty quickly that way. Also, if you have any other interactions in any other channels, like if you send an email to a prospect, if you send an SMS, like if any other kind of communication that you do off LinkedIn, that's another good trigger point to send a LinkedIn invite to connect, because you're contacting them on another channel and you're more likely for that person to accept that connection request. And then of course, lastly, connecting with second degree connections is a really good example, because let's just say you're not connected to many people, I don't know, say 50 or something. Each of those 50 will have whole networks themselves, and between those people will be potentially, you know, thousands of potential connections, and they're all second degrees. And what most people experience is that inviting second degree connections, you're much more likely for that person to accept you because you're only one connection removed. So that's a really good tactic too. Now, switching from personal profile to a company page, I'd say the goal, if you're starting out here, is again increasing followers. And some of the ways to do that is, and the really obvious way is getting your colleagues or your staff or any people that you work with to follow the page. Just blanket rule, or like Slack everyone or message everyone to say, you know, follow the company page. You can build up followers quickly that way. If you're small and starting out and you don't have any staff, that's fine. There's other ways too. So adding a LinkedIn follow call to action in your email footers, You can actually, LinkedIn has a embeddable follow button that you can actually grab a little bit of code from LinkedIn, pop it on your site, on your website. So if LinkedIn's a really key channel for you, and if you are selling to prospects that are really easy to reach on LinkedIn because you know that they're there, because in some industries there's not many people on LinkedIn, like the more traditional industries, I would say. But if you know that your prospects are on LinkedIn, that's a really good idea, is actually embed the follow button on your website. Also, LinkedIn gives you 100 invite credits to invite your first degree connections to like your company page. So that's another really good idea. If they like it, then the credit gets refreshed and you can use it again. And every month you get 100. So like you can go nuts inviting all your connections to like your company page, and also posting regularly. So just, it's hard to say like what's the definition of regular, but for a lot of LinkedIn marketers, like a post a week is generally like where they start. So if you're posting at a post a week cadence, then that virality that we were talking about before, if that's getting in front of new people, then just the mere fact that that's happening, if you interest them, they might then click back to your page and then follow your page. So this dynamic of profile versus company page, I have highlighted here the fact that, as I said, my personal profile is connected with for about 4,400 people, whereas the company page is only 284. So you need to weigh up the where that sits for you, like where your community is larger. For me, obviously, it's on the profile side, not as much on the company page side, but that doesn't mean that you can't use them together. And what I think is probably a good approach is to think of the traditional advertising funnel, where you reach a lot of people at the top in the awareness phase, get them interested in your product or service, engaging with your content. And at the desire part of that funnel, you're able to move them to your site. So that's all about kind of sending prospects from social channels to your website. And then the final layer of action is actually getting them to buy or sign up or subscribe or whatever your key action is. So if you think about the funnel that way, then potentially looking at your company page as being much more about driving traffic to site and converting, and your personal profile might be much more about kind of reaching a lot of people. That's certainly the case for me, because I've got more connections and a larger community there where I can reach a lot of people. And then I can focus on just kind of value-based content, not necessarily trying to drive to site. But what I can do a lot as a personal profile is share the content from the company page. So the company page might be much more about link sharing. I can then take that as a personal user and share that, and then write something much more engaging on top of it. So using those two assets, I guess, together, and then thinking about how this multiplies across all the people in your company, and you can start to see where the potential is, especially for larger organizations. Just a quick example. So from my profile, I've just pulled out a few, a post that got into the hundreds of views, right? And you can see that one sticks out here. This one in the middle that nearly got to 1,000. Now, there's a few things to say about this. So one of them was sharing content from someone else. I didn't put a link in this. There was kind of no reason to, really. I mean, the other two, I was trying to drive traffic somewhere else, but here there's no link. And also there was one comment on this post, whereas the other two didn't have comments. And I would say that probably that's a reasonable indicator of those two things combined has helped to kind of almost, double the amount of views versus the post on the left, and was certainly a lot more than the one on the right. Switching to the company page, just looking at some of our company posts from social status, and a bit meta, but looking in social status platform itself at the social status page, you can see then the impressions, which isn't too bad. It's a 675, it's not too far away from that 900 number. And here we've actually shared content and tagged, it just doesn't show up in the text here, but tagged Danielle, who's the founder of Scrunch, another great Brisbane-based business. And generally, I would say tagging and involving people in your posts, heroing them and heroing their content is just flat out just a really solid approach on LinkedIn anyway. But I wanted to highlight this post here. So this post had quite a lot less likes. If you look at the like counts, only 3 compared with 19, 11, and 8. But it had significantly more comments. Still, the numbers are low, but the comment number there was quite interesting, because if I just jump over to this in social status, I might just open it directly on LinkedIn so we can see what happened. So what I did was I posted this, and I thought this is a really good piece of content. It's like engagement rate benchmarks. You know, people like to know that kind of stuff. So I asked a mate of mine, Selby here, to actually go on there and ask a question. And then that gave me an opportunity to answer it. And then a mate of his then asked a question as well, and I answered that. Now, because there was activity in the comments, that was a really strong indicator to LinkedIn to say, hey, there was something interesting about this post, because people are discussing the subject of this post. So it helped push it out a lot further than some of the other posts. And we'll get back to this idea, but that is essentially like what I did there on a one-to-one level was created what the industry calls an engagement pod. Now, when we talk about engagement pods, and Lem Pod is probably the biggest one for LinkedIn, it's a group of people that all agree kind of off LinkedIn to like all of each other's content. And it's basically just a bigger version of what I did with my mate there, to jump onto my post and post a question, post a comment. Except this is scaled, there's a lot more people in the pod. And so the theory is that you join a pod, you like the other people's content in your pod, and they like your stuff, and everyone's liking each other's stuff. And that might sound really good, but LinkedIn's very good at kind of shutting this. Well, so they don't shut it down, but what they do is they kind of limit, they see that as inauthentic interaction, and they limit the performance. So, you know, that worked, I would say, fairly well to increase reach with, you know, coordinating with my mate. But if we kept doing that again and again and again, you could almost guarantee that the reach will start to fall, because LinkedIn's going like, right, okay, so these people just keep engaging with the same content all the time from the same person. And that is essentially what you're doing in a Lem pod. And, you know, they work on tactics to mix it up and blah, blah, blah. But like, LinkedIn's always trying to stop this kind of stuff. So what I would say is look at what you can do in a really bespoke manner. Like, you know, if you've got, you know, you're planning to say, for example, your next 10 posts on LinkedIn, pick the one that you want to really put the effort behind. A piece of content that you know is going to be very valuable to your followers, and then coordinate something like this, you know, with people like maybe a colleague or someone at an adjacent company or something like that, or a friend. But just see what happens when you stoke this kind of engagement and manufacture it just a little bit, because that can help it along, and it can then increase that viral reach. And if it is genuinely engaging content, then other people will comment, because there's a live conversation going on. So it's worth trying. And so I'm not against engagement pods, because there's an element that works there. You just have to, I would say, do it yourself rather than kind of joining these things. And so another really big strategy that LinkedIn marketers have come to realize is that mentioning and tagging other people or profiles works really well. And I love to showcase River City Labs here on LinkedIn, because it's a great example of it, right? So this is very meta now, because we're talking about this session, but RCL, you know, tagged me personally and then tagged the company page. And of course, that's something that I wanted to promote as well. So I liked it, I shared it, you know, the social status liked it. And so when you do that, it's almost like a kind of like semi-guarantee that you're going to extend viral reach, because RCL gets in front of, you know, the connections, some of the connections I have and some of the followers of social status. Here, it's just done, you know, way more. So for the Activate Plus event, you know, tagging the people that were part of the pitch, and their companies happy days. That got in front of a lot more people than if they hadn't have done that. Another tactic that marketers on LinkedIn are using more and more is this idea of talking in first person. And I've got, the #1 influencer on LinkedIn, Richard Branson here, but alongside 2 other great people in tech, Sally Ann, and of course RCL's own Peter Lorre. And all 3 of them, if you read the copy, are speaking in first person. And I think it's just more of a trend, and I think that it just makes it a lot more human. Like, you just come across a lot more authentically. There's no reason to write your LinkedIn bio in third person anymore. I think it's all about being personable and approachable and friendly. And so first person, even from a company page as well, I would say, not just personal profiles. This works really well as well for company pages. And even some of the big brands, you can see are now transitioning, especially in other channels like Twitter, are transitioning to first person. So they're becoming a bit more sentient, maybe. There's this other theory about, and I kind of touched on it a few slides ago, about using links. It was that post in the middle where I shared this post from Ryan and I didn't include a link. Now, this was a really quick test that Guy Kawasaki did. And this was a while ago because he was talking about iOS 11, but you can see the difference in impressions or views between basically saying the same thing and not including a link, whereas in the second post, including a link. But what I will say is, in this first post, he actually included the link in the comment. So yeah, the first comment was the link. And, unfortunately, this was screen capped when it was really young. So the post was only 3 hours old. And we know that post lifespans are a lot longer on LinkedIn than they are, say, on Facebook or Instagram. So I'm sure there would have been way more likes and comments on this, but it was all just about how fast this post goes out when LinkedIn knows it has a link on it. And I think that that's a very interesting point to make, is that, again, when we're thinking top of funnel, you don't need to load up every post with a link, because you may find that you get higher organic reach if you actually leave the link off. And if you do link it, yeah, drop it as the first comment. I'm not saying don't use links at all. I'm just saying not on every post. So if you do post links, definitely use LinkedIn's Post Inspector. It's really handy for previewing how the link renders in the newsfeed, because it turns out that, like, some websites, when you share them on LinkedIn, either the image doesn't load, or it loads like this really random image, which is not the feature image, or, the title might not look right. So if you just go to this Post Inspector tool inside LinkedIn, you can test your URL before you post it and just make sure it looks schmick. If not, then go into your CMS, into WordPress or whatever you're using, and upload like the Open Graph image, or adjust the title accordingly. So back on this idea from the greatest hits about the single sentence double spacing strategy that caught on a few years ago. Dream Data is a SaaS tool, and they did a really good case study on this. But basically, one of their team, Laura here, posted essentially that. It was, single sentences, double space, and keep in mind, after the first 2 sentences, the see more link would have shown up. So it'd be truncated and collapsed. And then when you tap see more, that's when the whole post reveals itself. But they actually saw that on that day, website visitors to the Dream Data site spiked. And it also resulted in higher, what they call MQLs, which is the marketing qualified leads, because they're a business that nurtures people through the funnel and generates leads and relationship-based marketing. So that was very successful for them, and they continued doing it and found that this was a real winning formula. So I do think that there is some value to this, especially when you consider how you can incentivize people to tap that see more and provide a really good hook. So again, 2 really good examples here from Taylor and Julian. When you read these and then you read the hook, yeah, it really is very motivating to tap see more. It's like, here's my answer. Or, you know, the workaround, like they're really good. These are two great examples of that. And so you can certainly look towards creating this kind of knowledge or FAQ kind of based content, or you can look to more narrative forms like this example from Haley. And I think this certainly, when Josh started using, in fact, she actually says Josh in this post, so this was from a few years ago. You know, when you look at that post again, of all the conversations I had at a dinner party, one really stuck with me: see more. Like, it really just begs you to tap see more to see more. And then, of course, because it's quite engaging as you go through it, then people are motivated to comment along. Now, I think that probably LinkedIn users are more savvy these days and are less, this is less effective as it was a few years ago, but it's still better than not doing it, I would say. And until such point that it stops really working, like, you know, who would have thought, you know, 1 million impressions off a text post? Everything you hear is all about using rich media, video. And here we've got plain text that's just going bananas. So I would say, yeah, try it out, see what happens when you mix up a narrative hook like this, or mix up a kind of more informational, educational hook like these. But yeah, try it out for yourself and see how your audience reacts to that. Another little insight from Julian's company, Demand Curve. He's actually got a really fantastic playbook, which goes into the nuts and bolts about LinkedIn organic. But this was a very interesting point that I wanted to pull out for this presentation, which was about cities and clusters of people. So again, if you tend to sell to people rather than more just awareness and getting like online acquisition and people come into your site and kind of naturally converting, if you have to kind of work for a sale and communicate with people, then taking a bit more of a city-based approach to LinkedIn might be a really good thing to do. So they found that actually LinkedIn's algorithm is very much primed for city-based clusters. And that means essentially that if we think about you as your personal profile, connecting with people city by city is a decent way to do that, especially if you've got some budget to run ads. Because then, you know, if you're connecting with people in a city, you're running ads to people in a city, you're increasing the opportunity for people in a confined location to see your content. And LinkedIn's algorithm will kick in from that organic perspective, and the kind of virality that we saw before will be kind of accentuated within that city. It's obviously going to bleed out, but it's going to realize that there's something significant about the cluster of people in a city. And cities tend to be less unwieldy than dealing with, you know, prospects all over the world. So it's a very decent approach if that's how you sell to people, and worth a shot again. And it doesn't take much in terms of just kind of tweaking what you do to attract more and kind of communicate more with people city by city. Okay, so, you know, we've been talking about these few tactics for posting on LinkedIn. So if you're going to commit to this, if you go, all right, I've been a bit dormant on LinkedIn, but I'm going to do a post a week. If you're going to do this, build up those connections, and at some point, look to switch your account actually to creator mode. So this is very much like, you know, on Instagram, where you can switch your account to a creator account. What it tells LinkedIn is it says this person is now going to publish posts, and apart from that call to action changing from connect to follow, it primes LinkedIn for more posts from you and more content. So it's a good thing to do if you're going to commit to it. If you're not ready, there's probably not much point switching to creator mode, because if you're still building connections, then keep it as the call to action and build your connections. But yeah, when you're ready to go, I personally am just about on the cusp of doing this. So I've still got it off, but I'm ready to switch to creator mode soon once I start getting more active with posting. And definitely posting is one thing, but LinkedIn have this whole other area called LinkedIn articles, and I put in really tiny font here, thought leadership, because I hate the term and it gets overused to the nth degree, but it is thought leadership. The idea is that you're posting longer form content. As you can see, the composer has become full screen and it's asking for a cover photo, it's asking for a headline. You're writing an article here and you can add images and videos throughout. I'd definitely say, look to try to get to, over 1,000 words. And in terms of what you post, think about headlines and concepts for articles that are emotive or they spark debate. I think anything where you can get people to encourage them to engage a bit more and even share that content is exactly what you want. And I know that's easy to say, but very hard to do. But consider these other things as well, is that you're genuinely adding value. And don't sell in these. I think like you can perhaps sell right at the end, but keep it all about value exchange. And I also probably wouldn't post an article on LinkedIn if it had search engine optimization value to your website, because if you've got a blog article that can compete from an SEO standpoint against all the other blogs out there and has a chance of ranking on page 1 of Google, post it on your blog. Don't post it here. But if you know that you're targeting keywords from an SEO perspective that are really competitive and maybe your domain authority isn't high enough, then LinkedIn is a really good place to put that, because if you were going to publish it on your blog, it probably wouldn't perform very well anyway from an SEO perspective. So here you've got an opportunity to actually reach more people than you would organically in search results, if you kind of think of the trade-off that way. So yeah, consider LinkedIn articles as your place to actually forget about SEO for a while and actually create valuable, interesting content. Now, if you are struggling for article inspiration, then actually open up your company page, click on the content tab in LinkedIn, and then the trending articles will allow you to filter this by industry and even by country. And then you can get a sense of like, all right, Aussies in the marketing and advertising industry, what have they been recently reading on LinkedIn? So as of today, this is what's trending in terms of LinkedIn articles, and that can help maybe provide ideas for you to riff off some of these, or perhaps guide you a little bit just in terms of broad themes. Just a few other functional bits and pieces of LinkedIn. So LinkedIn groups, are they dead? This guy doesn't think so, but yeah, I mean, he himself is a LinkedIn groups advocate, but is saying that, the vast majority are pretty spammy. So yeah, I think like a lot of the industry's moved on to Facebook groups now when it comes to groups, or they've moved on to Slack channels or Discord communities. What I would say is do a search for LinkedIn groups that are relevant to your industry and see if there's anything useful there. If you find groups that are actually like weirdly engaging, jump in, because yeah, you've got an opportunity to actually create a bit of momentum in a community that's probably quite rare, I would say, on LinkedIn. Live. So LinkedIn launched live video a couple of years ago, and it's still it's certainly not beta anymore, but it's not available to everyone until you're approved. But thankfully, the application process is not rigorous at all. So a lot of people will have no problems passing it. You just need a minimum 150 followers. And you need to be active. No policy violations, easy, but you've also got to turn on two-factor authentication if you haven't already done that on LinkedIn. As long as you satisfy all that, fill out the form and you'll be approved, and you can then go live. So instead of going live on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere else, Twitch and whatnot, like YouTube, who could forget, now we've got a 5th channel where we can go live on. So happy days. But yeah, according to LinkedIn's own stats, much more comments are generated on live videos. And as we saw before, comments are a really strong signal to say there's something interesting about this content, and we'll extend the organic reach of it. LinkedIn stories LinkedIn was the last channel to the game with stories. And it's the same concept as posts, like in terms of, tagging people, companies, tagging individuals. using stickers like as you would, it seems a bit strange on LinkedIn, but using stickers as you would on Instagram. If anything, I think stories is just another way to be visible, right? Because stories are right at the top of that mobile feed, of the mobile news feed. And just generally, if you're getting excited about this idea of creating content, but you know, it's hard. Like, it's hard to think of content ideas. Courtney Johnson put together this awesome LinkedIn article, actually, that goes through all these ideas for post ideas. Check it out. It's really cool. There's heaps, and it just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, and you'll get some good, if you're brainstorming, you get some good hooks that you can, you know, think about how that could work for your organization, for your industry. And yeah, the last thing I'll say about the bots is that, so, you know, I mentioned before that I've got about 4,400 connections. Now, some of those were acquired through a bot. So what I did was, I didn't actually use Phantom Buster, but these days Phantom Buster is probably the one that you hear most marketers using. And they don't just have these kind of tasks for LinkedIn. They actually cover lots of channels, and I've used Phantom Buster myself for Facebook, but you can grow your LinkedIn network pretty quickly with a bot like Phantom Buster, because what it does is essentially uses your account as if you were doing it, and you can give it parameters. So you can say, like, you know, invite business development managers in a particular city who work in, you know, finance, and then it will just go and send invites to all those people. So it can speed things up for you, but I wouldn't put the pedal down too hard on bots, because people these days know when they're getting messages, emails, connection requests from bots when there's no relevant messaging. And your likelihood of response or connection will be just a lot lower. That's just numbers game. So if you know that with bots, so some people just ramp up the bot activity because they know that their result rate's going to be lower. So yeah, I mean, it's a consideration, and this tool is used by a lot of people. So it's there if you want to use it. Last but not least, in our last 20 odd minutes, we're going to look at LinkedIn Campaign Manager, because this really is such a powerful platform for reaching people, the right kind of people with ad spend. And there's two things, if you're new to Campaign Manager, there's two things that you should do first up. Number one is install the insight tag. That is basically the pixel. So annoyingly, all the social channels call the pixel, or like what Facebook calls the Facebook pixel. They call it something different, but what it is there's a little bit of code that goes onto your site, onto your website, every page, and enables LinkedIn to connect some of your website visitors to actual LinkedIn users, so that then you can actually reach those people later with ads, or you might be able to reach them immediately. So it's just a really fantastic way to remarket to people. And I'm sure you've experienced this yourself when you're browsing around the web. You've had a look at a site, you've opened LinkedIn, or indeed any other, you know, any channel, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and you see an ad from the site that you were just on. That is powered by the insight tag. So if we jump into Campaign Manager here on LinkedIn, you access the insight tag from your account assets here. It's the first option. And if you haven't set it up, you'll need to set it up. But let me just show you what it actually looks like. Install the tag myself. So it's just a few lines of JavaScript. And you would copy that, you would then paste it into your CMS in the header, as it says, actually it says above the closing HTML body tag, right? Okay, so that's where it goes. That's where you would paste it. Or if you're using Google Tag Manager, happy days, you can implement it that way with just your partner ID. So once that's installed on your site, if you're not technical, your developer will do that. Once that's installed, then over time, I'll just switch over to the website demographics. Over time, LinkedIn has collected all this information about the people going to your website. So this is before you've run any ads at all. This is all stuff that you can do for free without spending $1. So over, what's this, the last 30 odd days, there's been nearly 3,000 page views on the social status website, and LinkedIn has been able to connect a lot of those visitors to what's being displayed here, their job function. So we know that the majority from marketing, that makes total sense. So a marketing tool, job title. So we can actually get a bit more specific about like social media marketing specialist. Excellent. That's who we target. So this can be really interesting. You can even get down to company. So like what companies are actually coming to your website? Unilever, great, you can sell to them. But like nowhere around the web do you have this kind of like granularity where you can actually see the company names of people that come to your website. That's pretty amazing, actually. It's really, really powerful. And there's other things here like, seniority, if you're interested in that, location, country, US. So this is fantastic, and it's all enabled by that insight tag. So if you haven't installed it on your site already, install it. That's step one. Get it installed so it can start collecting this. And this is just interesting anyway. But the whole point of doing that is so that you can run ads to all of these people. So let's go back into the actual ad bit, because I want to show you what I did. So I said before, right at the start, I said, you know what, cost per click. Yes, we keep hearing the cost per click's really high on LinkedIn. Actually, from this campaign, my cost per click average was $1.97. Now, I was actually quite surprised and quite happy with that it was sub $2, because generally, when we run traffic ads on other channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that's a very comparable cost per click. So I would not say at all that is a high cost per click. And of course, then naturally people say, well, what's the value of the traffic? Although we don't have conversion tracking working on Campaign Manager, this was actually kind of like a weird campaign, and I'll tell you why. Because we actually, go to social status here. I want to show you the post that we promoted, because we weren't promoting a post that went to our website. So that's why conversions are a little bit iffy. This was the post here. And so Social Champ is actually a partner. They're a partner of ours, and they had highlighted us in this list of the best tools. And so we thought, that's going to be a really great post to promote, because we're not saying we're the best, these guys are. And so we were sending traffic actually to another site where then you would click through and see, social status is ranked really highly. So if you didn't know social status then, maybe you know Social Champ, then you would discover us that way. So it's kind of like promoting other content from other brands. But anyway, that was the post, right? So if we go back to Campaign Manager, I'll show you how it was booked. So before I was talking about how like it's super, super powerful in terms of how you can target a user. I'll show you exactly what I did. So this list of countries here, 8 or 9 odd countries, are basically our target countries for the tool. There's many others, but this is kind of like the core set, which includes the big territories of like the US and the UK, Australia, Singapore. So this group of countries was the target. Then all we did was job title targeting. So anyone that matched any of these job titles that basically work in social media was up for grabs. And that audience size across all those countries was large, but it wasn't massive, right? 260,000 people. So for us, that is a very good audience already, and we probably don't need to really kind of like refine much further. Although you could say, but I only want, certain industries or people with at certain seniorities. You can go to the nth degree with your targeting, but that was sufficient. We thought that that's a good enough test. And I think when you look at the results, this certainly came off pretty well, like in terms of like, where, from $140 spent, reaching 6,500 people. So you could argue that perhaps, yeah, this cost per thousand was a little bit high, $21, but really you're running a traffic campaign. So CPM's not really of interest. CPM's much more of interest if you're running a reach campaign, because then it's all about like efficiency of reaching lots of people. Whereas we're really not too concerned with how many people we reach. We're much more interested in like driving people to the Social Champ website, of which we did 71 times. So effectively $1.97 cost per click. So yeah, that was for us. I thought that was a really good outcome. Would I do it again? Yes. So yeah, it's certainly a in our world a cost-efficient way to advertise to reach the right kind of prospect. But I did want to just show you quickly all the other targeting facets that you have at your disposal, because it is like super impressive what you can do. So let's just say we want to do another traffic campaign. So obviously, if you've got the pixel installed, you can use the pixel and just do retargeting to those people that have visited your website. Or if you like that example before with Social Champ, where we were basically doing job title targeting, you can do that again, or you can do that here in the audience attributes. So these are all the types of attributes you can use. And keep in mind, by default, it will default to your location. Unless you want to add more countries here, it will say Australia. Then that's when you can say, all right, well, I want to target, let's say, based on even a company name. So let's just say you wanted to target everyone at Westpac. Yeah, you could do that. So, or everyone who works in compliance in Westpac, you can do that in Australia. Like that is really quite powerful, where you can get down to like literally targeting companies or company size or industry, that kind of thing. If you do want to do age and gender splits, definitely education. What did they study? Did they study finance? Whatever. Job experience is fantastic. So this gives you the job title targeting, which is what I was doing before around actual job titles. If you know your target job titles, there is no other place on the web that lets you do this. So LinkedIn's got like the ultimate monopoly here for job titles, or even just job functions. So in that Westpac example, target people who, work in biz dev in Australia, or bring that down to a city, in Melbourne and Brisbane, wherever. So yeah, it's really, really powerful. And then finally, of course, traits. So are they a member of a certain group, or are they interested in certain topics on LinkedIn? And then you would go through and select your ad, and put in your budget. Now, you may be thinking back on that example when we ran that campaign, how did I get to $140? That was the minimum spend for 2 weeks. So basically, I said, I want to run this for like, I want it to be available for people to see across 2 weeks. Because you can either just go, I'll just do a big hit right now in like 48 hours and just spend all my money at once, or spread it out and just try to have opportunity to reach people over a wider period of time. It's up to you how you do it, but if you stretch it out to 2 weeks, LinkedIn was saying that 140 would be the minimum amount that it was able to spend. So yeah, presumably if you drop that down to a week, it would be 70 odd bucks. But finally, so, I think this, starting off in Campaign Manager, definitely set that insight tag up on the site. You can as well import audiences. So if I go back to the slides here, I had a point about importing matched audiences, or what Facebook call custom audiences. So if you've got a whole bunch of email addresses or mobile phone numbers, you can bulk upload those to LinkedIn. I would say though that unless you're in the thousands, minimum 2,000, but like you really need to be up further than that ideally. But if you've got a lot of emails, happy days, bulk upload them to LinkedIn, and then you can actually reach those people on LinkedIn and create like, matched audience, not only the matched audience, but then a lookalike audience that looks like them. Yeah, but I would say probably for a lot of startups, that's not the case. You're not going to have like a massive list of people. So starting off with the insight tag, or even just doing interest and kind of like job-based targeting, what I was doing before. I mean, I didn't even use our insight tag there, and I still had a great result. The last thing to say about ads is that you can look at competitors' ads. So I've just, Lashin's by no means a competitor, but I've just brought them up as an example because on LinkedIn, if you go to any company page and click posts, and then that will kind of load this sub menu here where you can then select ads. This will then show any ads that are currently actively being run by the brand. And that may indeed include ads that you would not normally see if you go to the brand of the company page. The concept of this is like dark posts or unpublished posts, which are both kind of Facebook terms, but it's when you want to create an ad, but you only want to target specific people. So you're not going to post it on the page. You're just going to run it as an ad. And that can give you some really good competitive insight about what, you know, your competitors are doing with their paid ad spend. Like what kind of messaging are they saying to people? It won't give you the details of how they've targeted it, but you can kind of probably infer it from the ad creative. So yeah, definitely do that. And I think that LinkedIn is great that they allow you to see this. The only channel that lets you do this is Facebook. YouTube kind of lets you do this, but it's not really to the same degree. But yeah, that's a great kind of transparency feature that I like about LinkedIn. Finally, this quote, "You can't improve on what you don't measure." I love it. I don't know who said it. It's unattributed, but yeah, I really believe that. So until you start measuring, you know, rely on your social analytics. I mean, Social Status does social analytics. It goes without saying, but there are actually a lot of tools out there that let you do this. And LinkedIn itself gives you basic analytics for your company page. So utilize this and learn from, you know, what you're doing. What is it that you change that makes performance improve? And that's it. So thank you so much for joining me on this session. If you have any questions, please reach me either on social or email. I would love to know if you've implemented anything from today. Yeah, hit me up. Let me know how it goes. I'm always interested. So thank you again for your time, and I hope to see you again on a future session. Thank you.